Hello everyone. Today I have a fun topic to talk about. Things that we think are real, but really aren't. So I recently watched a video from the Vlogbrothers titled, "Planets Don't Exist." And they talk about how the idea of a planet as a category is not well defined, and it doesn't really make that much sense. For instance, the planet Mercury is smaller than one of Jupiter's moons, and if Jupiter were 10 times bigger, it would be a star. And then we would consider all of its moons to be planets. And that got my ideas churning, and I thought, there's a whole lot of things that we think of as existing, but really are as arbitrary as planets. And before we move on, I want to remind you that I am not a philosopher. I'm just a guy who thinks too much on the internet, and you should take everything you hear in this video with the internet's grain of salt. So with that said, the things I'm going to talk about in this video do kind of exist from a certain point of view. They're all social constructs, which means their existence is not baked into the fabric of reality, but if they can be said to exist, it is because we all agree that they exist. The first category of things that we take for granted exist, but really are social constructs, are objects. Yes, objects. Everything that we think about as being distinct from every other thing, the boundaries that dictate what counts as a thing and what counts as not the thing are drawn by human consensus. Reality doesn't have these boundaries that separate thing from thing from thing. So for instance, that's why planets are social constructs. Electronic devices are social constructs. Furniture pieces are social constructs. Houses are social constructs. Everything that is a thing is a social construct. And you might say, oh come on. Everybody knows things exist. If my chairs and table didn't exist, how would I eat my meals? And you have a point there. But what exists is not the table as you're thinking of it. What exists is the matter that makes up the table. And the table is constantly losing matter because it flakes off and is constantly accreting matter from the air. So what you think of as the same object persisting over time is changing over time. And the only reason that we consider it to be the same object is because it seems like the same object to us. It's subjective. It's a point of view. Now you think there has to be some exceptions to this though, right? Like protons, atoms, particles are indivisible. That means that they are what they are, right? You can't really say that the dividing line between two electrons is arbitrary, or the dividing line between a proton and not a proton is arbitrary, right? Well, turns out it's not so simple. You see, why do we choose a proton and not an atom? Well, the idea is that an atom is made of smaller particles. So the decision to draw the boundary around the atom and say this is an object is something that we do. It's not something baked into reality. So we say, aha, if we can find the basic building blocks of reality, those are things that reality says are real, definite, well-bounded things. So is a proton one of those? Well, we can talk about a proton being made of smaller particles, quarks and gluons. But there's a problem with this. Singular quarks cannot exist on their own. This is a fundamental principle of nature. You cannot have a single quark that is not grouped with at least one other quark, usually two. That is physically impossible. So you could say that a proton is made of 3 quarks, or it is equally true to say that a quark is made of 1/3 of a proton. So even at the level of atomic and subatomic particles, the places where we draw boundaries around an object and say this is an object and what is outside of that boundary is not an object is our decision, not the universe's. Well, what about electrons though? And what about photons? These are particles that are not allegedly made of any other particles, and they can be found on their own. But again, the choice to draw a boundary around one particle and exclude all other particles is our choice. While doing physics, we sometimes draw boundaries around single particles, but sometimes draw boundaries around groups of particles. Neither a single particle nor a group of particle is more fundamental as far as the universe is concerned. And this is clear when we think about entangled particles, as we talked about in this video, which are modeled as a single object, a single wave function, with 2 particles worth of information. If we treat the particles individually, some key part of the information isn't there. We have to treat them together in order to get the full picture. So, is there any object, is there anything in the universe that can be thought of as actually existing according to reality, not according to the boundaries that we decide to draw around them? Well, I would say the universe itself probably counts as that. Or if a multiverse exists, then the multiverse would. You know, the totality of all reality, whatever that turns out to be. I would say that it's pretty clear that that exists according to reality. What are some other social constructs? Language is a pretty obvious one. Languages are different from people to people, region to region, and over time. So any idea that words are something that is real, that have definite meaning, is a nonsense idea. Words are ways that we communicate with each other, and the important thing is how effective we are at communicating what we intend, not what the words actually mean. Because according to reality, the words don't actually mean anything. The meaning is something that we agree to give to them. Oh, here's one you're not going to like. Logic and math. So many of us take for granted that reality is fundamentally logical and mathematical. It follows the rules that follow from one another. And if we define certain sets of rules, sets of well-defined axioms, we can prove theorems that result from those axioms mathematically. It seems that logic and math are things that are definitely true. But here's the thing. Logic and math are concepts. Concepts only exist in our own minds. They're imaginary. They're very powerful ideas, but they are nonetheless ideas. If that's not enough to convince you, consider the fact that logic and math are proven to be incomplete. Reality can't be incomplete. It's reality. It holds no contradictions. It is what it is, and it works. Logic, on the other hand, is founded upon infinite regresses, as shown by Lewis Carroll's short story, What Achilles Said to the Tortoise. Math is incomplete, as is proven by several very famous theorems, including the incompleteness theorem and the halting problem. Math and logic are extremely useful, but they are still social constructions. They're not baked into reality. How about some societal social constructs? Money isn't real. It just has value because we all agree it has value. You've probably heard that one before. Rights aren't real. We talk about natural rights as if they exist outside of any law, as if they exist within human nature or even within the fabric of reality. But that's not how rights are. Rights exist because we as a society agree that they exist. We as a society construct institutions of law utilizing the concept of rights so that we can have a society that works and doesn't tear itself apart. Oh, here's a dangerous one. Morality. We desperately want to believe that right and wrong exist, that morality is real. It is something that is outside of us and guides us toward a better life, toward the right life. And while keeping in mind all of the important philosophical ideas surrounding morality, such as the naturalistic fallacy, Moore's open question, and many others, I personally waver back and forth between being a moral realist and a moral constructivist. But it is very clear to me that most people's concept of morality, which they believe to be real, is actually constructed. So many moral values boil down to authoritarianism, or revulsion, or guilt, rarely digging deep to ask the question of what morality actually is, where it comes from. Is it actually real or not? And people who want to impose their morality on others generally have a lot more work on their plate than they like to think they do. Let me be clear, I am absolutely not saying that you should be cruel or break any laws. I'm just saying that most of the morality we think of when we think of morality is human construction. It is not baked into the fabric of reality. And the last social construct I want to talk about is identity and the self. I did a video on this topic way back when my channel was new. You can check it out if you want. Though I will say that my presentation skill was not quite as good back then. In modern society, we take it for granted that humans are individuals, that we are ourselves, we have souls, we are divided from everything else. There are hard boundaries between what is myself and what is not myself, what is yourself and what is not yourself. But once again, even these boundaries are not baked into the fabric of reality. The boundary between self and not self is something that we humans impose in order to make sense of our world. Now, I'm not going to say that you don't exist, because that would be immoral. But I ask that you consider the idea that the boundary between what is you and what is not you is something that is in your mind. As far as the universe is concerned, we are all part of the universe. We aren't isolated individuals. And the boundary between what is me and what is not me, and the boundary between what is you and what is not you, is something that is artificial. It is a construct. It is not a part of reality. So if all these things that we consider to exist are actually social constructs and not baked into the fabric of reality, what still remains? What still exists even if everyone in existence stops believing in it? Well, that, I think, is a video for another time. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.